The People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to the People's Platform. Navigating the daily stresses of life in a capitalistic society has created a massive need globally for people to find purpose, meaning, joy, connectedness, and self. My guest tonight is Ashley Davis, leadership coach, who joins me now. Welcome to the show, Ashley.
Hi, Sonali. Thank you so much.
Hi. Tell us what brings you to Sri Lanka. Was it a vocation? You also have a background in the corporate world. So what drew you from that whole paradigm to retreats and self-awareness?
Yeah, beautiful question, and thank you. Why did I come to Sri Lanka? How do I find myself here? Actually, I think that was the question, was finding myself. So I do have a 15-year corporate background, mainly in sustainability and impact, a bit in human resources initially. And after 15 years, so I'm about 2 years outside of corporate, and after 15 years of working what I thought was my purpose and still very much feel connected to sustainability and impact, and this was in supply chains for one of Nike's companies in the fashion industry primarily, was a bit of a burnout, as well as just this question of, I wonder if there's something more. I wonder if there's something more for me to be doing, and how do I really connect to a sense of purpose? I had felt disconnected with the distraction and the busyness. I felt a bit disconnected from the work of sustainability and impact that I had set out on this quest to thought I was put on this earth to do, and found myself not knowing where to go next. So I had a big long supply chain trip to about 100 factories or so across Asia, and decided I'm going to go to a place for me. I'm going to do some wild and crazy, courageous thing where I, from America, take a holiday in the middle of a work trip. And it happened to be Sri Lanka, and I was attracted to the beaches and the surfing, and there was a bit of a yoga quest there. But really, it was to do something that scared me. If I don't know what I want to do next, if I feel disconnected to myself, the only thing I knew at the time to do was, one, travel, go to a beautiful place, make it a place that's my own, that is not connected to the work that I'm doing, totally put myself outside of my comfort zone, and outside of that comfort zone, what might I learn about myself that will give me some information, a hint toward what's next. And the place happened to be Sri Lanka, and it happened to be the beaches in the south that have kept me coming back for the past 6 years to discover, what does purpose not just mean to me, but what does it feel like? And then this discovery of, wow, how might I help others in corporate spaces, founders, academics, any type of, I've worked with a number of different types of leaders now, help them connect with this sense of self-awareness and purpose so that we can bring this back into the workplace and lead and drive companies in a really, in a way that might be different from the status quo.
Ashley, when we look at corporate leaders, those who lead organizations, initiatives, something that we find is that they are tremendously qualified. However, they come to a point where they realize that they need to stop looking outward and they need to look within. And then they hit a wall, because where do you find it? I mean, do you find it in spirituality? Do you find it in religion? Do you find it in nature? Who's going to curate a program which is akin to finding oneself, but it's such an individualistic journey, and it can vary from one person to another.
Yes. Who? Well, that would be me, among others. And yeah, I'll rewind just a little bit as I answer this question. It is so unique and individualistic for every person, these big questions that we can't not ask ourselves, and it's going to be different from every person. Yeah, maybe it's religion, maybe it's spirituality, maybe it's nature. For me, it was travel, being outside the comfort zone, and what I discovered was this sense of joy. What I discovered was, I've been working so hard, and this feeling of joy and a bit of a sense of freedom, I went, oh my gosh, I haven't felt this since I was a kid. Nobody told me that this was important to prioritize. And so what I would say to anyone who's then asking themselves that big question of, who am I? What do I do now? Where do I go from here? And it doesn't need to mean that you leave anything behind, right? You don't need to make a massive pivot as I have. But I would guide them back to the sense of joy, not just because that's what I found, but that's what I found is sort of the kernel of the beginning of this growth stage into who we really want to be and who we really can be, is what lights you up, what feels good, what can you connect with? And if you can bring a sense of that aliveness and joy into any of the work you're doing, then you really can't go wrong. So that's where I would start. And so maybe that's religion for someone. For me, it's very much been being in nature, and Sri Lanka is such a diverse natural place that I mean, I can sit and learn something on a rice paddy field or looking out at the ocean, and so it's nature and these curated natural experiences that I tend to bring into my support of leaders. And you know, I have also been told there's a bit of spirituality to what I'm doing. I think it's more neuroscience based and somatics, but if somebody wants to call it and feel that it's spirituality, that works as well. But it's really guiding someone to what feels right for them. What does freedom feel like for you? What does joy feel like for you? What is purpose? And it's not necessarily one thing that we're here to do. So the work is very much guided by a felt experience, and in this way, and led by the leader themselves. And in this way, it's not a cookie cutter, we're doing spirituality or we're doing religion or we're doing nature. It's, you know, I would work with them to send them back to what it is that really drives them.
We're living in an increasingly disconnected, warring world. How must we go about discovering the ability to still ourselves through this chaos?
Oof. It is probably one of the simplest yet most challenging things that I work through with leaders is this stilling. There is such a resistance that has been inherited by all of us to resist slowing down, right? To go slow means to be judged, to not be doing enough, look at the productivity and efficiency that we're all about. And so it really actually takes quite a bit of courage to pause or be in the stillness, or look out at the ocean and take a breath. And I think that courage comes from really taking a moment to connect with who we are and what we're here for, which to me is what we stand for, which is a set of social values. What are you willing to risk for? And if we stop looking outside ourselves for this validation that we're good enough and we start to look inside, there's an entirely new set of ways to self-validate. And in that way, it's almost like, how could I not be still for a moment? It is to me, it's a social responsibility, and it's a moral responsibility to slow down, to pause, to let, if you think of like, if you had mud or silt or something in one of these glasses and you stirred it up, to let that settle so that we can be clear. And when we're clear, we can be precise and we have efficiency. And one of the other things that I help people with in this, the courage to be still, is a sense of ease. Oh, it's okay to feel safe in a sense of ease, but we have normalized at our detriment and at the risk of our own health. We've normalized going so quickly. And so it's quite a luxury, we think, to slow down. That's something I just do on a holiday or a spa vacation, but to me it's really an imperative. And so if we care about changing ourselves and changing the world, it's a responsibility to step into that stillness. And yeah, probably it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And there are a lot of conversations that come up internally when we step into that stillness, and that's the piece to work through.
Sitting through the discomfort is one of the most challenging things. Holding a mirror to your own self, because we are told to be tough, we are told to be strong and resilient. But it's also okay to be soft, it's okay to cry, and especially men are at the brunt of this because they are meant to be leaders and providers and warriors. And society doesn't teach men, especially, to be vulnerable. So how do we bring in the men to these conversations? Because that's really important.
Yeah, I love that question, and I enjoy so much working with male leaders, heads of companies, founders, CEOs, and executives, because it's almost like there's this giant relief, or this big sort of wake-up call of, oh, you mean to be an amazing leader for myself, my family, my organization, I get to do it in a different way. And so, I talk about this robust vulnerability. And so, we might have a conversation about the robustness of vulnerability. So the power behind being able to connect with the self that we might call like soft or gentle. And when we can be soft and gentle, but we can also be strong and powerful. And I don't mean the power over, but the like power of self-awareness, the power of self-confidence, the power of, not needing to have all the answers, but working in connection and collaboration creatively with someone else, which requires the ability to listen and really hear someone else, which then relieves you of the pressure of needing to know everything, because what can we actually know and control? And so then we can bring others into being generative, into being creative. So I see that there's a little bit of relief when we go like, oh wow, actually there's a superpower in befriending vulnerability, because if we can find the power within us to befriend that, and I call it robust, because it's a strength, and I'm also borrowing that from one of my favorite poets, David White. When we can find the strength to be vulnerable, we open up the ability to really connect with ourselves. And when we can connect with ourselves, we can connect with another person more deeply. And, we're driven so much by isolation and competition, and that need to be right, and the expectation to have all the answers. But when suddenly we feel like we don't need to play this game alone, and we can be in connection with everything around us, I think there's such an abundance of power there. And so it really changes the narrative.
Speak to us about the importance of community and connectedness, vis-a-vis the importance of recognizing that nature is the co-facilitator of all of this. We can't live our lives devoid of nature.
Yeah, we can't live our lives devoid of nature or a connection to nature. And so when we connect with the self, and that's also connected to the question around vulnerability, and that's for any and all of us. So I can't connect with nature or a sense of care for nature or learning from nature if I haven't first connected to myself. And I can't connect with the next person if I don't have a sense of my own self. And so it's this like outward spiral of the self to another, and then to nature. And so it's really this imperative to be self-aware. And then we're able to work with nature as a co-facilitator. So for example, if I were to bring someone on a travel experience and we're talking about courage, I might have them seated at the edge of an ocean or overlooking a far horizon to really get that felt sense, the felt sense of courage. And I might not call out to you that like, oh, it would take a lot of courage to walk across that ocean, right? But we're feeling the sense of courage of like, wow, here's this ocean, the waves crashing. And I could work with nature in any which way. Or another example of co-facilitating with nature would be to connect with stillness or to connect with vulnerability, you also need a sense of presence. And presence we can access through relaxation, ease, and feeling like this sense of spaciousness. And presence allows me to be simultaneously aware of myself and of you and what's going on around me and in the world. And so to facilitate that type of quality, I might bring someone to a rice paddy field that's maybe it's just rained and there's this sense of calm. And so nature is mirroring what we're trying to feel. And so much of the work of self-development for leaders and learning and growth comes from this experiential learning. So when we're in nature, we're having a full body experience. I'm not reading in a textbook like, okay, here are the 4 cycles of the seasons that a tree goes through. Like, yes, of course, we're going to continually have these phases of the seasons within our own life, but when we can go out and smell and feel and be in it, we start to also step outside of the analytic mind, and we step into something called the empathic side of the brain, and we start to feel. And when we start to feel and we start to experience in nature as this co-facilitator, we have the learning and growth is far more durable, sustainable, lasting than if we were to just sit and talk in a room or read a book. All of these things really awesome, and all of these things should work in concert. But there is something that is so potent and powerful when you're sitting with nature intentionally as this backdrop for whatever the topic of conversation is. And then of course we can learn from nature how to treat ourselves, each other. Again, I think I said I could sit on a rice paddy field or at the edge of the ocean, and I can be learning from the waves, or I can be learning learning from the clouds. And we're all going to make our own meaning, but it's also a way to step outside of this mind that has us comparing ourselves to others and looking externally for validation. And I believe that nature really helps us to connect within. So in many ways, nature is this beautiful co-facilitator of learning and growth.
All right, fantastic. We are in conversation with the leadership coach, Ashley Davis. We're going for a short
The People's Platform.
ඉම්ලි රස්සාව අතාරින්නෙම නෑ.
ඔයාට මම ඒ දීපු සේරම ආපහු ගන්න.
දැන් සෑහෙන කාලයක් තිස්සේ මම මේ රහස මගේ හිතේ තියාගෙන ඉන්නවා.
අපි දෙන යන පාරින් අදින් පස්සේ ඉම්ලි අයින් වෙයි.
ඔයා මට ගොඩක් ස්පෙෂල් කෙනෙක් ඉම්ලි. Please open your eyes. मानो जैसे गम की पलकों से
ඉන්නේ අද රාත්‍රී 9:30ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්.
We live in a world of progress, but what if progress isn't reaching everyone? Millions of Sri Lankans struggle without access to clean water, safe roads and bridges to a better life. But you have reached out. You have touched their lives. Thank you, Sri Lanka, for making Gammadda the most impactful rural development movement in our nation. Gammadda, for the people, by the people.
For the first time in Sri Lankan musical history, 4 amazing musical groups on 4 exciting stages in one arena. Sunflower, Sidua Sakura, Arrowstar, Kurunagala Baji, Sirasa, Sir Brown Fiesta. On the 19th of July from 7 p.m. at Cuddle Calais Ground in Negombo. Make sure you don't miss out. Be there to witness musical history.
සිම්පත හරියට ලියාපදිංචි කරගෙන තියෙන්න ඕන. සමහරව එහෙම දන්නෙත් නැහනේ.
මේ සිම්පත කොයි තරම් වැදගත්ද කියලා මේ දුරකථන පාවිච්චි කරන හැම දෙනාම දන්නේ නැහැ කියලා තමයි මම කියන්නේ.
මැයි වලින් පස්සේ ලොකු ගම් වතුර තත්ත්වයක් එන්න නියමිතයි කියලා. කාලගුණ විද්‍යාඥයින් අනතුරු අංගවන පසුබිමක ඔබ කොයි විදිහටද මේ අපේ තෙත්බිම් සම්බන්ධයෙන් දකින්නේ?
කොළඹ නගරයේ තියෙන නාගරික තෙත්බිම් වලින් 21%ක් තියෙන නාගරික තෙත්බිම් වලින් වැසි ජලයෙන් 39%ක් රඳවා ගන්න බව.
දැන් විලද නගරයට කටයුතු කරන කට්ටිය දැන් එනවා පරිපාලන නගරයට. ඔතන මේ දන්න හැටි අපි ගත්තොත් අලවතු කොට එහෙම නැත්නම් කිඹුලවල ප්‍රදේශයේ අපිට තියෙනවා රැයට කෑම කඩ. ඉස්සර ඒක තිබ්බේ කොහෙද? කොළඹ. දැන් ගොඩ දෙනෙක් මේ පැත්තට එන්න පටන් ගන්න. මොකද ඒගොල්ලන්ට අර කොළ පාට ගතිය. මේ තියෙන බ්‍රීස් එකේ කියන්නේ ඇඟට දැනෙන වෙනස අනිවාර්යෙන් දැනෙනවා.
ජාතික මෙහෙවර සතියේ දිනවල උදෑසන 11ට. The People's Platform.
Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Ashley Davis, a leadership coach. We're talking about the importance of creating a life of meaning, purpose, and joy. Ashley, oftentimes we find ourselves in a cycle of toxicity and unable to process our emotions. We're caught up in our own heads, unable to connect with nature, unable to channel our own power within ourselves. As a result of which, our bodies also go through a lot. We're constantly with our jaws clenched, our bodies are in fight or flight mode. Parasympathetic nervous system, for example. Speak to us about the importance of being able to regulate our nervous systems.
Yeah.
Grounding techniques. Because these aren't really taught at school.
No. They're not taught at school. They're not taught in the workplace. I don't know if they're taught at home. They were not taught at home to me. And to be able to do that gives us such capability and such capacity to re-ground ourselves and make these clear and precise decisions about our lives. And yeah, I think it's one of the most important things. And so when we're caught up in this toxicity, we're really triggering the sympathetic nervous system. And so, you know, we need both. And so not to say the parasympathetic is not any better. It's just we don't give it a whole lot of attention. So I tend to talk about, this regulation. And so I might have an overemphasis on the parasympathetic simply because it doesn't get as much attention. We're really in that sympathetic all the time. And so it could be something as simple and easy as feeling your feet on the floor, which is just enough for a second to break the chatter in the brain. Or, you know, if I ask someone to meditate for 5 minutes, that might be a big ask initially. So maybe it's 1 or 2 full breaths. And I find we often don't even know how to breathe. So someone might breathe and we'll first see okay, well, where did your breath go? Oh, I noticed it only went here. Well, our lungs go all the way down here. So we might just practice
deep breathing.
A full breath where the whole body expands. And so again, we need to give the brain wants a job to do. And so we can't expect that, okay, we can just brush all the thoughts away and they can move around like clouds. But when we're breathing, we can focus on where is that breath going. So you might imagine it going to a place in the body that feels tense. You mentioned the jaw, lots of us on these clenched jaws, or I see a lot of tight shoulders, or a lot of tension in the belly. So maybe we would just imagine inhaling and bringing a breath, bringing some space. We have so much tension and tightness. And I mentioned earlier about presence, and presence needs a sense of expansion. So if we're compacted and tense, we can't step into presence or clarity. And so if we can bring in a breath and expansion to the body and soften, we're just sort of breaking that cycle of keeping ourselves stuck with the mind. And the body is going to reflect what's going on in the mind, but also vice versa. If we can bring a sense of ease and a sense of clarity or a sense of joy or freedom, whatever that is, into the body, we can actually start rewiring the brain doesn't know what's like actually real and what's going on, what's happening. So if we can
brain knows what you tell it.
The brain knows what you tell it. The brain knows what the body tells it. So instead of the brain constantly telling our body, we can consciously pause, feet on the ground, I feel my sit bones in the chair, I'm taking a full in-breath to wherever I want to direct it. And now I can start bringing in maybe an image of like, when did I feel at my best? And you can turn up the volume on all of the senses there, and you start to retell the brain what's actually possible versus being stuck in that loop or that cycle of toxicity or overwhelm or whatever it is for a particular, I'm not enough, or a fear of failure, whatever the limiting beliefs and the things that keep us stuck, is connecting to the body, is connecting to a regulated nervous system. And of course, there are a whole bunch of health components that come into that, you know, making sure we get good sleep and having healthy boundaries. But yeah, okay, I can have an intention of like, oh, sure, I'm going to sleep 8 hours and I'm going to make sure that I don't take calls before a certain time or after a certain time. That's all very well and good to set as an intention. But quite often, there are things that keep us immune to making those positive changes. And it has to happen in the body first to accept and be that change before we can't really think our way through it.
Actually, I'd like to talk about the concept of self-compassion, because most of us are so critical about our own selves, and that in itself is extremely detrimental to our well-being. How do we work on developing a voice of self-love?
Yeah, a voice of self-love, which feels like it also connects to earlier in our conversation of sort of flipping the mirror from seeking outside ourselves for validation and what am I supposed to be doing in the world and who am I? Oh, sure, I'll let my parents or society or bosses or whomever tell me. And flipping that mirror actually back to myself. So it feels like we have a bit of a connection there as well. So how do I begin to develop compassion for the self, which connects also to what we said about stillness. In stillness, I can start to see that I am enough and I have enough once I sit through the initial discomfort, which I kind of promised there will be a little bit of discomfort there. And we just start to see ourselves in a different way. Same with if you're out connecting in nature. So, for example, I might have someone intentionally take a surf lesson. Okay, anybody can go down south and take a surf lesson. Cool, you come back after your weekend or your holiday. But when you take a surf lesson and connect with the body and the board and the ocean, as you are at the same time simultaneously working through something that you're feeling stuck with, we'll come to the self-compassion here, then I might ask you, what did it feel like to be in the water? What might you have learned from the wave? What was it like to stand up and look where you're going? Oh, wow, suddenly I start to connect with myself and realize, oh, I'm the one that chose to set my eyes here. Or, oh, right, I learned how to ground my feet into the sand and hold myself steady and ready for that next wave to come. Oh, okay, now I know what that feels like in my body. How can I connect that to my life? And we start to build these other resources and tool sets that start to change the inner narrative of I'm not enough or I have to measure up. And we start to build that self-confidence and self-awareness and self-assurance. And in this way also begin to have some self-compassion so that, oh, I totally deserve to set these boundaries. It's my responsibility to set these boundaries, for example. And I might even have, as silly or simple as it sounds, I might actually even have someone look in the mirror and say, it sounds very awkward, I love you, until it doesn't. Until it doesn't, because how can I show, what measure of compassion can I show to another person if I can't first show that to myself?
Absolutely.
And how can I treat another person with empathy if I can't first show that to myself, and that's also connected to that the disconnect we sometimes can feel with nature. If I can't do this for myself, then nature is like 2 degrees separated. And it does come back to this ability to be in the stillness and slowing down and giving oneself the permission to really develop and to develop what we need for ourselves. And that's going to be different for every single individual. So then it would be about seeing what works to help us build that self-compassion.
At a macro level, one of the biggest contradictions is planet and profit. I began the conversation by saying that we're living through all of life's daily stresses in a capitalistic society. But capitalism is what we're caught up in, and how do we use that to our benefit, to the planet's benefit?
Yeah, so this is really harkening back for me also to the 15 years I spent in corporate, and the reason that I chose even at a young age to go into business from the very beginning was I believe in the power of business to create systemic change in the world. And for me, the driver was a care for the planet. I grew up on the beach and the ocean and in the mountains, and spent a lot of my childhood outside. So this great care for the planet, and also feeling that I really wanted a powerful way to connect with nature and to connect others with nature. So if we can use the tremendous power of business to actually not have profit and planet in conflict, but to create a real shared values approach within a business setting to highlight what's going on in the planet, or to make decisions within companies. I mean, I worked in supply chains. How are we building our products? I worked in footwear and fashion for a long time. How are we building our products in concert or collaboration with nature? What are we saying to our employees that we care about? How might we teach or guide or invite even our clients or our customers to think about the planet? And so we have these massive platforms in businesses and in capitalism to really make businesses better for the planet, and really have the planet and the environment with a seat at the table.
Ashley, if we are to be hopeful, I'm trying to imagine a world of men and women who are self-aware, a value-driven society with people who give themselves the permission to be joyous, a world where people are free within themselves. How can we bring about such a world?
Ooh, I would like to know does anyone else have the answer for this? How might we bring about this world where we are free to give ourselves permission to feel joy, free to step into a sense of freedom and purpose? And it feels as simple and as complex to me as taking that breath and stepping into nature, going and doing something that we really, really love, that we really enjoy, that really feels connected to the self. And so if we have a bit of intentionality, mindfulness practices, meditation practices, just reflection, more reflection and still time in the day, even if it's 5 minutes, I think this builds tremendous compassion. And through that, we begin to get a sense of clarity of who am I? What am I here for? How do I connect with others? And we start to dissolve the barriers between each other, between me and you and the next person, because then I start to see, right, I have all the same, I have my own bouquet of struggles and fears, you have your own bouquet of struggles and fears, and the way we keep ourselves stuck and hold ourselves back. And when we start to realize that we're all just we're all in the same journey of life with these struggles. How do I slow down and say, well, what really matters? And I think we have a set of shared global values around, fairness and respect, and then we have our own societal values and our personal values. And when these can become more clear and we can connect to them, and we slow down, I think slowing down in stillness actually can help us maybe even speed up and lead into the future as well. It doesn't mean like, oh, we should all go sit in a cave, right? That's not going to be for everyone. But I think the more mindful and self-aware we are, we start to build that world where each of us can have our own personal sense of freedom. If I don't know what that feels like for me, how does the next woman or the next man know what that is for them? And so it does feel like this moral responsibility to explore what freedom and joy feel like so that we can really lead with our values and purpose intact.
Yeah, absolutely. And we weren't put on this earth to just go to work, pay bills.
We weren't?
Pay taxes and just die. So it is incumbent upon each of us to step out and go on this journey of self.
And step out and step inward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before wrapping up, Ashley, you use poetry to invite a sense of vulnerability and meaning making, to step outside the strategic thinking mind. So I'd like you to sort of close the interview with one of the poems you've selected.
It would be my absolute honor and privilege to read Mary Oliver's The Summer Day. The Summer Day by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass. The one who is eating sugar out of my hand. Who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. Who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Beautiful. Ashley Davis, this was such a beautiful conversation. Thank you for your time.
An absolute pleasure, Sonali. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again next Friday. Good night.